So, great topic of appraisal. I know everybody's excited this morning. So there's some changes taking place and have been taking place in our appraisal business, and which also affects y'all in contracts. One is the lenders doing appraisal waivers. So have any of y'all had waivers issued? Let me see hands. Okay, so we have had some. We've had one. And we have one right now that we just issued on one of our listings. So they are taking place. I have spoken to a couple of lenders, and I understand that on these waivers, they are having the buyer sign some type of document to go along with that. Is that right, Joey and Eli? Are y'all having people sign a document agreeing to the waiver?
To my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay.
I haven't personally originated a file that's needed in a hybrid appraisal.
Okay.
But I could just say from what I've heard, there is a waiver. There's a form involved, yeah.
Okay. I did talk to Rachel at Trustmark the other day, and Rachel did tell me that if there's a waiver approved, and this all comes, I assume, out of this desktop underwriting system, where it comes back and says that the credit's good enough, the down payment is substantial, and they're willing to waive the appraisal. They're doing that also in conjunction with using an AVM, automated valuation model that they can pull this computer generated value on a property. And so a lot of times they're issuing these waivers. Now personally, I know we had one issued on a property that we were representing the buyer on, and I knew the property was listed higher than probably what it was going to appraise for, but they issued that waiver on it anyway, so it closed. It was during the crazy period.
Can the buyer deny having
Yes.
the waiver?
Yes, they have to agree to it. So,
Okay.
and my contention is on this, and I think this is a discussion for you as agents to have with your broker, what y'all want to do with this. I told Rachel when I talked to her that I believe, and I firmly believe, that we as the agents representing that buyer need to be notified that that's taking place.
Absolutely.
We have an appraisal contingency in our contract, and if they issue this waiver, that contingency is never satisfied. And I also believe that if they're going to do that, we need the opportunity to have that discussion with our buyers over the pros and cons of having that waiver issued and not having an appraiser go out, not having the home measured. But y'all know the square footage that's put in on those listings is always correct, right? Y'all ever found one that was wrong? You know, they get that waiver issued, and 3 years down the road, they call you back to list that property, and the square footage that was used, you find out when there is an appraisal on it, maybe there's 300 or 400 square feet of difference. And that buyer had no idea, but they signed that waiver. So I think we need amendments to the contract. I asked Rachel, and I think we need to all be working with our loan officers, asking them if waivers are presented to that buyer before that buyer signs that waiver. We need to be able to sit down and counsel them on the goods and bads of that. And then if they absolutely want to do that, we need to do. In my office, we need to do amendments to the contract. Let me throw this disclaimer out first. Y'all know I'm a broker. I'm not giving you advice as a broker. Always go back to your broker and discuss any of these issues. So anyway, that's my contention on that. The waivers may be fine in some cases. The buyers may not care, but we need to be involved in that. Yes, Stephanie. You have a question?
I'm wondering if that's an interference with contract.
In my opinion, it is, because the contract should dictate how the transaction goes. And so Fannie Mae has come up with this product though, so if it's, you know, the credit is great, and they're putting enough down payment, well, they're giving this option. But, and I think we as representing buyers need to prepare our clients on the front end of possibilities that could come up with these waivers, and then also with hybrid products that we're going to talk about today. So, yeah, I think we need to have those conversations with buyers on the front end. So if you are presented with this from your loan officer, because y'all know your buyer may be using Rocket Mortgage, and we may not have much communication with that lender. So buyers need to be educated on the front end. So yes, I think it is going contradictory to our contracts. It's leaving us in a peculiar situation when that contingency is not satisfied in the contract. And my fear would be down the road that if they have signed this waiver and legal issues come up and we get drug into it, have we performed our duties and obligations to that client as we should have during that purchase transaction? So, okay. All right, we're going to talk, go into the more complicated one, and I'll let McKeever and Neil kind of take this. Tommy is going to play a video. How many of y'all saw Lee Brown when she was here? Incredible, just an incredible lady. And so she early on put a video out on these property data collectors. They also are called site inspectors. Michelle Johnston, about a month ago, reached out to all three of us. She had received a call, and it was to schedule a site inspection. And she called us. She had no idea what this person was. She had not heard of this. And she said, they didn't say they were an appraiser. They said they wanted to call and schedule a site inspection. And so we explained to her that's what it is. It's part of these hybrid products that Fannie Mae is offering. So I advised her, I said I would reach back out to the buyer's agent and see what's going on and see if they're aware of this. And she did. But let me back up just a little bit. The site inspector, the girl that called on behalf of the site inspector, was wanting her to give her a one-day code, which we don't have the ability to do, or put a contractor box on it, or meet them and let them in. So she reached out to the buyer's agent. Buyer's agent reached out to the lender, who is a local lender, and that local lender had ordered the appraisal through an AMC or appraisal management company. The AMC took it upon themselves, without communicating with the buyer nor the agent, to order this hybrid product and send a unlicensed, unvetted, possibly background check, who knows. Fannie Mae has guidance out that the AMCs are supposed to have them checked, background checks. But I have documents to show that that's not always the case, because a convicted felon was sent out to do a data collection. So anyway, the agent reached out to the lender. Buyer had not approved it, and so they were able to switch them and switch it back to a full appraisal.
I think the lender had no clue.
The lender had no knowledge of this hybrid product.
All right, put your broker hat on now. So is there any reason, I'm talking to my broker too, and other brokers in the room, is there any reason then that as a listing agent, the seller could not put in a counter offer that no hybrid appraisals will be allowed?
No reason that I know of whatsoever. I would have no problem doing that. And I think that's there again, when we're talking to our buyers, and even your sellers as a listing agent. I mean, my goodness, I want a appraiser coming out.
Absolutely.
I don't want a person that is unregulated. There's no regulation through the state, although we are working on that. I mean, I've been in contact with Ed, our new executive director of the appraisal board. They're working on this, but I think it would require legislation. There's no mechanism within the appraisal board to regulate these people. Since there's no requirement that they be licensed, so I think it would require legislation to get some type of oversight in place.
I have a question. So I'm in this situation right now. I had never seen this, so when I saw this class pop up, I was like, I probably need to be here, but I have a seller, and I have permission to share this. I have a seller who had 2 AVM models, and he called them appraisals. And when I got it, I was like, I've never seen an appraisal that looks like this before, but both of them, you know, were on the high end, and here I am, I'm trying to make sense of this, because it's pulling comps. Everything that's online using the AVM model along with what this gentleman used, and then I Googled the appraiser, and I couldn't find their name either. But everything that's on all of the AVM models shows that they're pulling comps from just a micro community where the appreciation rates are much higher. But he's not in that community. He's in a different community, and he basically, you know, took out a loan based on that information. Like, he couldn't give the loan without that. So I guess in situations like that where there was like an error, I believe it's an error, you know, and I don't know that we can get what they're saying that we could have gotten there. Like, what happens in those types of situations?
Well, without a full appraisal being performed, that transaction is going to go through. If that value is inflated from this AVM, the transaction is going to take place, and that buyer is probably overpaying for that property.
Well, yeah, it was his, and he took out a loan based on, they approved the loan based
I
on
got you.
that part. So, and what I take from what you guys are saying, he had to assign something, waiving a traditional appraisal, which he probably did. I'm thinking he did that.
Well,
That's not always true.
It's like a DCR.
I could just do it.
on the AVMs, they do not have to sign. It's the appraisal waivers, if there's a contract in place, they're having to sign an appraisal waiver, I believe.
And that might
I
still
fear
be
what's
Linda
gonna
Mills.
happen is with these AVMs, so an appraisal valuation model is what all it is a computer running an algorithm, which is what we do every day. We fight Fannie Mae all day long every day, and I want to preface all this. I was the chair of the appraisal board. I also serve on the board member for the Association of Appraisers. So we're with Fannie Mae all the time, and I call her Susie Pantsu. Susie Pantsu actually has an aside one time and told me that they would love to get rid of appraisals. She's way up high in Fannie Mae. So Fannie Mae is doing all of these things, I think, to see how little they can use us eventually. And the problem with that is Fannie Mae, we fight with Fannie Mae. I know y'all hate us about half the time, and I get that. I'm also but we fight with them about half the time on your behalf, because what will happen is we'll send in an appraisal and we'll say it came in at contract price, and then they'll send us 5 sales and say, why didn't you use these sales? And it's just what you're saying, but on the opposite end. They'll say, this house, you should have used this house. Well, we didn't use that house because that house had problems and structural issues or whatever. And so that's why we didn't use that. You know, so why didn't you use this one? And so it's the same thing, but in reverse. And then, I actually had one time, they told me I was too high one time, and then I said, oh, okay, well, I don't know what to say about that. Then they came a week later and said, you're too low. And I was like, y'all need to make up your mind where your stance is. So what happens is, you know, you've got these hybrid guys, which is a whole different thing. I know that's hard for everybody to understand, but a hybrid is different from an automated guy.
Right.
Because you've got these data collectors, which we don't have any way to they're not licensed, they're not anything, and maybe one day they will be. But right now, the appraisal board at the state, we can't do anything about BPO. We can't do anything because that's not who we handle. We handle, the appraisers, and that's, if you're not licensed, we can't do anything to you. There's so many different little things out there that are a bit of an issue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but it's Fannie Mae ultimately is your biggest issue.
That's right, thank you, Amy. Y'all know Amy, she's been an appraiser forever, and very knowledgeable.
Is your property, is it in Tennessee or Mississippi?
It's in Tennessee.
Tennessee's a little bit different animal because it's a disclosure state. Now, Mississippi, the AVMs are going to be really all over the place because what I found they do is they take a deed of trust that is recorded at the courthouse and assign it a percentage. And every deed of trust that comes through, they mark it as a sale. Because I've had several underwriters come back and say, well, why didn't you use this sale? But the AVM said this property was next door to you or across the street. And it wasn't a sale. It was a deed of trust that was filed maybe on a refinance, but they assigned it an algorithm based off the assessed value and said it was a sale, and it wasn't a sale, it was a refinance. So with Mississippi being non-disclosure, they just pick and choose what they want, and you may have some off-the-wall stuff here in Mississippi, is what I found personally, so.
So the same thing as his estimate?
Okay, that was my next one. I was fixing to go, y'all heard of that company.
You're comparing $1 million property to
Yeah.
a $90,000 property across town.
Right.
You can't do it.
Well, and that's kind of what an AVM is. It's basically, that's what, that estimate with that other last letter of the alphabet in front of it, that's what they do. They're running AVMs basically, or using these computer modules to
On
come
their
up
own
with
algorithm.
numbers.
Everybody has a different algorithm
Yeah.
that they develop that's proprietary.
Right, so that's what they're using, and that's basically what an AVM is. So it's as reliable as what you can pull up on that, just about. So those AVMs are certainly going to create some issues. I see a hand up way back in the back from my old friend Kelly McBride.
Yeah, as a lender, I gotta tell you my stomach, and you get the buyer that comes in and says, well, if I go to ABC Mortgage Company, I don't have to get an appraisal. They've already run me through and I don't have to, I can get an appraisal waiver and that's $350 or $500, whatever the going fee is. And so at that point, I explained to them the importance that this appraisal brings. Don't look at it like it's dollars and cents. Look at it as it's somebody measuring your home, it's somebody giving you a true value, it's looking at actual things that are sold. But in their mind, they're trying to cut costs. I just had one that was an absolute nightmare. Saturday morning, before they were supposed to close on Monday at 6 in the morning, the buyer called me and said, I don't have a good feeling. And I'm like, well, you need to call your agent. Call your real estate agent, tell them that you're, I don't think I want to buy this house. It's been rehabbed. It had an AVM or something, she didn't want to pay for an appraisal. She didn't want to pay for a home inspection. She's trying to save money. They closed. She came to closing. And I've been doing this 40 years. I attend most of my closings. The same closing I've ever been to, the buyer didn't say, thank you very much for helping me. She didn't smile the whole time she was there. And when we left, there was no eye contact, and I thought, man, this is going to be a mess. Sure enough, in 24 hours, she called me and she said, my feeling about this house was right. She said, I was out there cleaning the house, getting ready to move in. The kitchen cabinets fell off the wall. And I'm thinking, so, I reached out to the agent, who is an established agent in our community, and I'm like, well, I think we've got problems. There's probably going to be a lawsuit over that. But where it stemmed from, it had not been measured. She had it measured. I don't know who measured it for her, but she sought legal counsel. There had been an AVM done on it. Maybe when the people bought it, I don't know. But to me, that appraisal is like a big piece of the meat of my deal. It is one of the most important things there because I don't know every appraiser, but I know all the ones in this room. And, if I have a problem or I'm thinking, hey, this is way far off, I'm gonna communicate however I'm allowed to do so and say, you know, y'all go back and relook at this. But something that's fast and quick and cheap, you get what you're paying for. And this was a true testament to that. We're saving money, we're saving money. And all I could say to her is, you didn't even opt for a home inspection. I mean, you knew it was a renovated home, and then to make matters worse, there had been electrical work that they had asked to be repaired. The person that represented the seller furnished a statement. She went back and contacted the electrician. He said, that's not my statement. I never did any work on that property. I mean, I'm seeing fraud all over this whole deal. And I was just devastated thinking, it's just, you know, and it wasn't that big of a loan. I mean,
Right.
Can I say one thing though? I mean, these products do have their place. I don't want you guys to go away thinking that we're appraisers and we just don't want you to use them because we're not going to get paid. I mean, that's certainly part of it, of course, but I would say, if you're going to go out and borrow $10,000 on a house in Belmore Lakes, then you don't need us to come out. You do not need to pay us $500 to come out. Send somebody by there, I don't care who it is, it's fine. Unless, you know, there's always risk associated. Could there be an environmental issue? Could there be something else? So they do have their place. I just argue where their place is, and I think we differ on that.
And I think a refinance situation, you're fine using these. You're just doing your loan, reworking your loan to make it better for you, and you're refinancing, and I have no problem with appraisal waivers on those.
home equity lines.
Home equity lines,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Uh-huh.
But when there's a purchase transaction in place, and none of us are perfect, we're all human. Home inspectors, termite inspectors, the appraisers, we have all been in behind each other and found stuff that others have missed at some point. I was appraising a property in Memphis years ago for Merle Purvis. The news lady was a buyer. Met her there. She was there when I did the appraisal. And the termite inspection had already taken place. The home inspection had already taken place. And we were going from inside the house into the garage through the laundry room. And I looked down and I said, "This termite damage." And nobody had caught it, but there was termite damage in that house. And so we're all human though. We're going to overlook things, but it's that extra layer of protection to protect that buyer, that consumer, that I think to waive that over the appraisal fee is just ludicrous. It's almost like using the assessor information to list a house rather than spending a little money to have it measured by an appraiser and making sure you have it right. In today's world, that extra 100 to 150 square feet at $150 to $200 a foot adds up, and is certainly worth way more than the cost of having it measured. Here straight.
I was just gonna say, so we've mentioned appraisal waivers, we've mentioned ABMs, we've basically touched briefly on hybrid. Explain what a hybrid appraisal is,
Okay.
how that differs from the ABM and how that differs from.
Okay, all right, here we go. Lee Brown again. Lee Brown has created this video. I think she does a great job, and I don't think all three of us combined could explain it any better than she does. So
All three of you combined don't
We're
have
more
the same amount of
energetic.
hair that she does.
I wish I had her hat.
Kim may give her a run for.
she really broke down the data collectors that are out there. They also are called site inspectors. If y'all get calls from those, know that's what they're engaged. The lender has engaged this, maybe not the lender, or the AMC is the one engaging. Like I said, the other case that Michelle had, the lender had no idea that they were using this type of product. So these lenders sub those appraisal orders out to these AMCs, and AMC is taking it upon themselves to order what they feel comfortable doing. And I promise you, the fee that AMC was going to charge was still the same as a full-blown appraisal, but what they figured out is they can order these hybrid products, the data collector an appraiser at their desk for a much lesser fee, and they retain the profit.
Well, that's
So,
fraud, isn't it?
it's not a fraud, they're charging, there is an
They're doing it
appraisal.
right now with
In an
appraisals.
appraisal, in a hybrid appraisal, there is an appraisal. Not in a waiver, but in a hybrid appraisal, there is a certified appraiser signing an appraisal report. So it's not really fraud, they're
Explain that.
very, very gray area.
What happens is the hybrid appraisal order, they send the property data collector out to the house, they do their inspection, they send it to a certified appraiser, one of us, which, as far as I know, none of us are on this list, we've avoided it. They send it to a certified appraiser sitting in their office. The appraiser's never left the office, never drive through the neighborhood, never seen anything, doesn't know the neighborhood other than what they did prior to. Maybe they get on Google Maps and drive around that way, but they're then typing the appraisal from their office and send it in only using the data that the property data collector supplied to them. There are a bunch of nightmares with that. I mean, one simple one, I think we probably all get this phone call weekly, if not monthly. Where was the rotted wood? Where was the peeling paint that has to be fixed? You're gonna call the appraiser, and the appraiser's gonna say, I never went to the house. Then you're gonna have to call the property data collector. And as she said, $50, $75, the highest I've seen is the property data collector's getting paid $100. The appraiser in office, this is from a local lender. I just saw this 2 or 3 weeks ago. Property data collector's getting $100, the appraiser's getting $350. So the total appraisal fee is $450. That's $100 less than what that mortgage company typically pays for an appraisal. So to save $100, these people are allowing the property data collector to go out and do that.
That's high.
That is the highest I've seen. I mean, but that's the only one that I've had printed with a local lender. I've not seen anything with another local lender. And when I say local lender, their office is in DeSoto County.
So an appraiser, I guess the appraisal shows that it's a hybrid appraisal, because
It'll be a different
why
form.
would you sign off on something that you didn't look at?
It's a different form.
Okay.
It's its own specific form. It's
And
not
that's
the
a good-
1004 form that you're used to seeing.
And that's a good question, Terry. I would not personally, I wouldn't put my license on the line. The appraiser assumes 100% responsibility. The data collector has no E&O. We assume 100% responsibility for that report, and we cannot make the tool that we have available, extraordinary assumptions, that we have. That's one of our tools, according to USPAP, to use if we need to. That information that's being provided to us is correct. We can't make that assumption. This hybrid product is just as if we're having to value it just as if we had been out and looked at it, but we're not given that luxury.
Which brings up the thought of what appraisers are actually doing this, and are they scraping the bottom of the barrel appraisers? They don't have any
Obviously-
issues anywhere
And
else.
who has time, you know, licensed or not licensed data collectors, they probably don't have a job at all to go look at.
Well, this is nothing against anybody that's done this job, and I might be doing this job in 6 months for all I know, but there have been reports of Uber drivers doing Uber and doing property data collection in between their Uber routes. And, I mean, again, nothing against it, you gotta make a living, pay your bills or whatever, but
Well, I did it.
that's just not the professional level you expect to get.
I did a test run back in 2018, and just when they first brought these things out, and it was 4 houses in DeSoto Village. Everybody knows where DeSoto Village is, I'm sure. I mean, and y'all have seen our Q ratings and C ratings and stuff like that. Well, I got this report. It was like a 7-page report from like Joe Smith. Had no idea who this person was. Couldn't find him anywhere listed as a contractor, realtor, anything. And so they had this house in DeSoto Village. The soffit was coming off. You know, the roof was shot. They listed it as a Q3, quality 3 home, which we all know, no shade against anybody in DeSoto Village. There is no Q3 home in DeSoto Village. And they had it as a C3 condition, which means no repairs. And the soffit's hanging off the thing and, you know, everything like that. So, and I have to base my decision off what that person said. I mean, obviously, having some eyes and seeing some pictures and doing a little due diligence, but that's the kind of stuff you're gonna get. And like Bill said, we can't assume that stuff's right. So, you know, I'm not gonna, after I saw that, I'm not touching another one.
So
Well,
you've
the
got the
appraiser's
data,
going
the
to sue.
site collector data to do one of these hybrid appraisals.
They sent me like a 7-page report.
Yes, ma'am,
So I have had my own personal experience with the hybrid appraisal as a listing agent. And they requested or required some repairs to be done, and they were safety related. They wanted a post to be repaired and then the concrete. Well, they really didn't specify which one. So I was asking the question, okay, you know, are we talking about the post or are we talking about repairing the concrete? And so just as we're talking about, it turns out, I'm assuming that it was one of these, the little go-between people that went out and measured it. And then they in turn sent the information back to the certified appraiser. Well, I was talking with the certified appraiser, and he told me, well, I hadn't actually been out there to the property, I never saw it. I said, oh, well, how you, and I was blown away. So, but long story short, the seller decided to move forward and make the necessary repairs, because this was an investment property, by the way, so it was little. And so anyways, we got the repairs done, and the buyer was able to move forward and close, but it's a real thing, it's happening. It's happening. And the person that, the data collector was another realtor.
Okay.
Can I ask who made the appointment for the appraisal?
Who made the what?
You were the listing agent?
I was the listing agent.
Was it
And
the
so,
appraiser who made the appointment?
I believe it was, and I think they just text me and say, hey, we got an order, you know, can we go out there for the appraisal? And at the time, those properties were vacant. And I told them, sure, you know, here's the code, please proceed, kind of.
But they didn't disclose that it wasn't gonna be the appraiser going out, but it was a data collector that went out.
No, they didn't. They did not.
They did not.
But I later learned that it was a data collector that had went out there and, you know, gotten the information and then sent it to the certified appraiser. Because when I was questioning, you know, when the buyer's agent sent me the information, I'm like, okay, well, they just sent me pictures and said, well, you know, these things need to be corrected or whatever. I'm like, well, which is it? Is it the post or is it the concrete?
Right.
I need clarity.
I think that's a good point, is the Tennessee agents need to be careful when you give the one-day code to. I don't
Yeah.
know where the liability falls on y'all.
Well, I know where we all know where the liability falls.
Well, I didn't want to say, I
Yeah,
didn't.
I won't tell you where the liability falls.
I have another question.
So, yeah.
I want to know, what can we do as an industry to prevent this?
Okay,
Can we
so-
say to the lender,
Say
hey,
no.
can we make sure it's a certified appraiser and not a hybrid? What can we do?
And that's where we need to start having discussions with sellers, buyers, and possibly even writing provisions in your contracts. There again, talk to your broker. Some of these data collectors, I know personally of cases in Mississippi and throughout the country where the data collector has called and presented himself to be the appraiser and trying to set an appointment. In Michelle's case, they did the right thing and they presented themselves to be a site inspector. So be careful. Be careful. If you're getting calls or texts to schedule that appraisal and it's somebody that you do not know, most of y'all in DeSoto County know majority of the appraisers. Occasionally there'll be one that you may not know. Go to the Mississippi Appraisal Board, search it for that name. If that name does not show up, you know that is not a licensed appraiser that's contacting you. Whoever you let into your listing as a listing agent, you are 100% responsible for it.
So the time to avert this is during the contract phase and not, I mean, at that point, it's too late to say, no, the seller's not gonna allow a hybrid appraisal because the contract's already in place and there's no provision. I mean, buyer's lender can do what they wanna do. So the time to avert that, and by the way, I'm not a managing broker, so please talk to your own broker. My broker's sitting here. I am a broker, but I'm not a managing broker. But so what I'm understanding is the time to avert that and keep this from happening is to have the conversation at the listing appointment with your seller and say, I just want to explain to you, or at contract phase, whenever, this is what can happen It's not happening a lot yet, but it will happen more, and the only way for us to make sure this does not happen is to have language in the contract, in special steps or counter offer or whatever that specifically says seller will not allow any hybrid appraisals. A certified appraisal must be done to satisfy inspection contingency.
I think that's the proper way to do it. And
Talk to your broker.
yes,
We're
yes,
gonna
100%,
say that 5
y'all,
times.
because this has to be a policy coming from your office
Yeah.
as to how these are handled.
That's,
Now,
is
no.
that okay how I do
Thank
that?
you for actually saying that,
My brother said I can do that,
Tracy. I just
so.
want to say, as a staff member of the association, if you call with questions regarding this kind of stuff and like, oh, should I take legal action? I think you'll all know, Tommy cannot provide legal advice. And I will literally hang up the phone, call Mr. Bill and go, what do I need to tell them? And then I'll get back to you on, and I'm gonna tell you exactly what he just said. You need to talk to your broker. If your broker does not have an answer, maybe provide other legal counsel in some ways that I'll let explain.
So, and tell your brokers, they're welcome to call any of us, Amy, any of, well-seasoned appraisers, they're welcome to call and discuss these things. We'll always be glad to help. Yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify something for me? From what I know in a transaction, it is the buyer's lender who orders the appraisal.
Correct.
Why would the seller or the seller's agent know what that appraisal came back as? From what I have experienced, my primary is Alabama, we have to get consent from our buyer to look at that document.
Correct.
And then when we submitted any repairs to the seller, it's on a repair amendment. So, proposal, thank you. No, there's no proposals in Alabama.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So, from the seller or the seller's agent perspective, how would you catch that? Or as an agent, how would I catch that?
They have to call the listing
The
agent to
listing
get
agent
in.
get in the
It's
house.
going to be,
To set the appointment?
Yeah.
that's going to be the only
Access.
mechanism you'll know is who's calling to schedule and try to enter your listing.
Correct.
So now know that these AMCs are recruiting realtors as data collectors.
I've gotten calls.
McKeever and I both,
45 minutes out of my way.
we hold dual licenses. We hold sales broker license and appraiser licenses too.
Well, since they're gonna run you out of business as appraisers, it's a good thing you're realtors too.
Oh, $75 on the way.
Yeah, so we were recruited by one, and we looked at all the documents and the tools that they use, all the craziness that's involved. But you better be very cautious. You need certainly to discuss this with your broker. If you accept one of these assignments, it's my understanding, you will be working outside the scope of your license and certainly of your E&O coverage. So know that if you accept these, and realtors are accepting them throughout the state, I know, that you be very cautious.
And the training you get, from what I've seen, is some had a 15-minute video, some had a 2.5-hour class, and it was a PowerPoint class. You don't leave your office, you don't leave your computer, it's right there, and then you're ready to go.
That's your training. Eli?
So how do we know what lenders are using hybrid appraisal?
There's only AMCs using them. The third party that the lender is sending their appraisal orders to, they're the ones making the decision on what is ordered.
So how do we know?
You won't know.
When they call us.
Well, a lot of good lenders don't use AMCs. They have their own ordering process, and they don't go through an AMC. But a lot of them are using these nationwide AMCs. There's 30-something on the list now that are doing them. Of the 30 that we just went through, I think 3 or 4 of them, between the 3 of us, we'd actually heard of. And we've all been in the business 20-plus years. So
3 or 4 of the 30 AMCs you've heard of?
that we've actually heard of. But that's how many AMCs there are out there. There's tens of thousands of AMCs out there.
So once again, the only way you're going to know that this hybrid product has been engaged is when that appointment is scheduled for someone to enter your listing. The buyer may not know, the buyer's agent may not know. In Michelle's case, nobody Nobody in the whole transaction was aware, other than the AMC themselves. No agent, the buyer nor the seller were aware that this hybrid product was being ordered. And when you get that phone call from someone to schedule an appointment to enter your listing, that's where you need to know who they are and are they licensed. Short of that, you'd have no way of knowing.
And to say this, there's 3 lenders in here that I do work for, they don't use an AMC. They have an ordering process and a website and a rotation that's followed, but, and a small fee that's paid to them, but it's not an appraisal management company that's reviewing the report or making a lot of money off the report. And when I say that, like sometimes we'll pay a $10 upload fee for an appraisal we do. These AMCs are paying, the buyer's paying $600, $700, $800 for an appraisal, and when it gets down to us, we get our $450, $550. And that other $200 to $300, $400 stays with the AMC. In some cases, they're making more money off that than what the appraiser's making. So a lot of this is the national lenders right now, but it's gonna trickle down to where the local lenders are gonna feel this pressure.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say. The one encounter that I had, it was like a broker type mortgage company. But I had no idea on the front end. You know, again, I didn't know until I was contacted, but yeah, it's
If you see an $800 appraisal fee,
Huh?
if you see an $800 appraisal fee for a normal house, it's probably.
We're not getting that.
In this
We're not getting
It is very important to specify in this area. There are some very high-cost areas like Nashville. But I'm sure nobody in here does Nashville business. Also, the only thing I want to add, I don't want to be the last guy to jump on the dog pile or anything like that, but this is just kind of another step in the long trend of trying to phase individuals like us out of this process. First, you've got these big national groups like Rocket Mortgage that try and shut down the local lenders, and so, you know, ending a lot of good businesses. Now they're targeting appraisers, and then the next logical step is probably realtors after that. So make sure that you've got people that are working with loan officers. You can actually walk into their office and see their face and shake their hand.
Yes.
Local lenders,
And I can't express that enough, that local lenders, and ask those lenders, what is your appraisal ordering process? I know. When I send a buyer to a lender, I already know what their appraisal ordering process is. I know whether they use an AMC or a portal like McKeever was talking about, that just simply is a mechanism for the appraisals to go in and out of and be transferred back to the lender. Community Mortgage, Trustmark, all use portals. There are other lenders here that do, good local lenders that do send their appraisals out to AMCs. I know who they are. You should know who they are. You should know everything about these lenders that you're sending clients to. If your buyer comes to you with a pre-qualification letter from a lender that you're not familiar with, you should be calling into you. You're their voice. You're that client's voice. So by all means, take the bull by the horns and butt in where you may not normally do.
Want to ask them who the appraisers are on their list too.
Yep.
You can do that, huh?
You can. If they're using an AMC, they're not gonna know. That AMC is on their list.
Mostly now these AMCs are going around, they're just farming stuff out because work's so slow. Used to they'd send the order over to some, just on a rotation, send it to you. Now they're all asking for bids. So all they're worried about is who's gonna bid the cheapest price on it. You may get some
That's
yay-hoo
the
out of.
appraiser you want, is the cheapest one.
Yeah.
That's who I want, appraising that house, the buyer.
Concern is that I, on a daily basis, get something that says, hey, can you do an appraisal in Tishomingo County or in Jackson? And I'm thinking, wow.
Oh, yeah.
You don't even know where I am, but you're asking if I can do it. And,
Right.
and look, appraisers are level in business like everybody else. You're going to start seeing those appraisers go down to Jackson, or from Jackson come up to here.
I bet 'em.
And you don't know that I guess you or somebody was saying that it was a higher area that they were pulling comps out of. You know, if you're not familiar with the area, if you're not geographically competent, that's gonna be a problem.
Geographically competent.
Issue, if you really want to get into it,
You know, if you can't pull the correct data.
It is. Now, she brought up a very important issue
I
because.
stay in my lane.
Yeah, stay in your lane here. Okay, so she just mentioned the appraiser being a member of the Board of Realtors and having MLS data access. Be careful. Y'all probably have heard of the case, you know, a realtor just would not let a appraiser in because they were not a member of that board. That realtor had a huge issue with MRAC. So be very cautious in doing that. Appraisers are not required to be a member of a board of realtors or have that MLS access. How they get their data to do an appraisal, I don't know. They're supposed, we all have to be confident. We all say that we have access to all this data. A lot of y'all know, a lot of folks piggyback. And so be very cautious though about denying access to an actual licensed appraiser. Now these data collectors, as a broker, we will not allow a data collector to enter our listing unless the buyer's agent is going to accompany them and be there while they're there. That is the only way that we would allow one to go into one of our listings. We're not giving them any codes, we're not meeting them, they're not licensed people, they've had no background checks as far as we know, no regulation. I am not allowing those to go into one of my listings personally.
Has anyone, I can't remember what the changes were to our contract, but does our current Mississippi purchase and sales agreement specify a licensed appraiser, like it specifies licensed home inspector with the most recent changes?
I think so. I don't know if the verbiage is the pre-printed parts of that, but an appraisal is an appraisal. Anything less, AVM is not an appraisal.
An appraisal can only be done by a licensed appraiser.
By a licensed.
But a hybrid appraisal is an appraisal.
That
And
is
it can satisfy, so if your seller is the only one who can make this decision. If your seller, and talk to your broker, does not want a hybrid appraisal done on their house, does not want a data collector coming in their house, a seller can specify that in a contract.
That
And if
would
the
be-
buyer agrees to that, then the
Right.
buyer's lender is gonna have to be bound to that as well.
Y'all
Because
know-
the buyer is the one agreeing that that type of appraisal will not be done.
And do the lenders read contracts thoroughly?
It is the buyer, no, but at that point,
That's.
if it happens, you can go back and say, we
We
got
have
a
to
call
push
from a
back.
data collector, the contract specifically says it cannot happen this way, and you can, but if it's not in the contract, it's too late.
Have there been any states that have passed legislation, or is this still too?
This is all new. Ed tells me he's at the Arroyo conference, they talked about this. I don't know of any legislation that's been passed in any state yet. This is also new.
And Ed's the head of the appraisal board.
Yeah, so,
Well, you know, now would be the time to mention it,
We are-
because
it's been-
before January.
it's being discussed, but I think it's gonna be such a in-depth process that I don't know that starting on it this time of year would be, allow enough time to get it into legislative session in the spring.
It would.
You think so? Well, I know Ed and the attorney, Ed Neely.
I mean, if they were ready.
Executive director, but I don't know that they're ready.
If you
Everything
have
in
any
the appraisal
contacts, you
board.
can let us know.
Yeah.
So on the realtor.
If you know someone.
I have someone.
Yeah.
Who would take it up.
But-
You-
Clark
If
Wise
you
on
were
the
ready.
realtor aspect of it is who we need to contact, and especially like they did a survey a couple months back of what we wanted taken to legislation. He said out of 8,000 realtors, over 1,000, just over 1,000 replied to that. So check your MAR.
That's actually a high
emails.
number, actually.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a very high number.
Yeah,
So that's something that we need to put in there that we want addressed, so that for next year, when they go to session, he can.
I feel like the 2025 session will be when this probably needs, will get addressed. Until then, it's gonna be up to us to try to manage the situation. Y'all know the appraisal board was just divided from MREC. It became official July 1. So he's got his hands full right now trying to get this new office organized and running. By the way, Ed plans to be here in January to meet with all appraisers, and it'll also be open to membership. So if y'all want to come in, then you'll see emails that I'm sure y'all all read come from our board here on signing up and registering for these classes. So we'll have an appraiser CE class, a USPAP class in January, and the day before, the day after, we're trying to coordinate it where Ed Neely can be here to do a half-day class. So that'll be a good time for y'all to come and voice your opinions on this topic, and let's have an open discussion then. Ms. Terry?
I look up, I had an appraisal lately, and I've never heard of the guy, and I couldn't find him on the MLS, so I went to MREC and got him out of Oxford. But anyway, so if they not with MREC anymore, do we still go to our MREC to do a lookup, or do we have a separate place?
MAB, Mississippi Appraisal Board, separate website now. So once it was divided as of July 1, the websites were split, so you've got two separate websites. So go to the Mississippi Appraisal Board website and search for that licensee.
And I fear that you're going to see more and more appraisers traveling out of their geographic area, because, as you know, it's business is slim pickings right now.
That's right. And
I researched the comp in Coldwater. The appraiser was from Gulfport.
Oh, God.
What they
Well, that's
do
what I'm
is
saying,
they,
is
they'll
it's not
get
enough that
a
I'm not
window,
going
and
to
they'll come up here and they'll
Oxford
do 5 or
MLS.
10 of them.
So I'm not gonna go
Head back to the
practice
house.
there, I'm gonna refer it out, because I don't have the data to adequately represent that client.
right.
So, and for me, it's an ethical issue. It's not the fact that I couldn't, it's the fact that I really shouldn't, because I would be misrepresenting my clients, and that's against ethics.
I have
You
been
know,
to,
I can't work for my paycheck, I've gotta work for my client.
as a broker, I have been to Tupelo, I have been to Starkville, I have been to Columbus, to Grenada. I've got a corporate client that I represent throughout the north part of the state. I've been there, but I have to go in and make myself competent, and meet with brokers and talk to appraisers there, and make yourself competent so you can properly do that. That's a lengthy process. I have to do this because this is a client that I have to service. As an appraiser, I'm not going outside of my geographic competent area.
For $500?
Now, I feel like some of these appraisers, like Neil mentioned, may be a hybrid product, because now with our MLSU, we have access to data from the Gulf Coast and Jackson, and all those areas. So, and I certainly can look through that data and make sense, you know, if I
Exactly, that would
study
be
it on
different, you know.
So, anyway, this is a complicated situation. We're gonna have to manage it ourselves until some laws can be put in place and some regulations.
So as agents, the biggest thing for us take away is the conversations in a buyer consultation when we're meeting with our buyers the first time, so they understand, so that they can talk with their lenders, and they make sure what their lender's doing, and with our sellers, so that they understand when we're in contract phase what could or could not happen, may or may not happen.
We have the ability to shut this hybrid product down, and it can strictly be just piped out if we approach or just jump on it on the front end and knock it out. But that's the reason we want to have this class, is so y'all are aware of the situation, and you can take this back to your offices and to your brokers and start having these conversations and figure out, okay, what do we do as a brokerage? How are we going to handle this? And are we going to get involved? Are we going to be proactive and try to nip this in the bud? The same way, if appraisers would not accept those assignments, which I will not, I doubt seriously either of these guys or Amy are going to accept one of those assignments, but personally, I would promise you, I'm not going to accept one. I'm never going to value a property that I have not physically seen. So we have the ability, but you'd always know there are some out there that will accept anything for a check. So it's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in.
Bill, does a data collector measure the house?
Oh, yeah, when you talk about that.
Yeah, we need to talk about it. Go ahead, guys.
They have
They can, and they can also.
They have in your 15-minute or 2.5-hour class, whatever one you take, they have an app on your phone that you, and maybe some of your.
Oh, I have that, yeah.
So you stand back and you take pictures of it and video it, and it will measure the house.
Supposedly.
Hey, I'm about to start doing this, I'm gonna do my house.
You get $75 for it.
Is that the?
So this app will measure your house
It's
and
just
draws
your
it
measurement.
and sends it to the appraiser. And we're
You got
supposed
your
to be.
Kubicasa, you've got about 1 million different apps, and I'll just be honest with you, they're hit or miss.
They're hit or miss.
Well, I mean, we get them, like, when I do an appraisal, I always look at the pictures, and when the agents put the La Casa or whatever up there, I print it out, and I'm thinking I use that as my guide to measure, and I'm like, oh crap, okay, this isn't right. And it's sometimes 200 or 300 square feet off, it's trying to be close.
Right? It's usually something simple, right, would you say?
What's that?
Wouldn't you say it's something simple? If it's dead on accurate, it's a square.
Yeah.
But once you start, because what you have to do is, on the Kubicasa, I don't know, have y'all ever used it? Okay, it's a scan, and you scan the baseboards. But if you've got something all cut up, then you have to open the closets and you scan it. And if you miss a corner, and I've tried this on 1 million houses just to see, because it's a long story, but I'm one of the people writing the national exam right now. We're trying to figure out how to include some of this stuff. So we're walking around, and sometimes, on occasion, it's close. I mean, you know, your 3,000 square foot house, maybe it says it's 2,800 or something like that. But if I'm doing a square,
That ain't great.
well. Close. But if it's a square, then sometimes it's a little more accurate. But even me, after I've done it a bunch of times, I still can't quite. I've talked to the people at Kubicasa, I'm like, it's still not working right. So it might give you some idea if you're trying to figure out what to price a house or something like that. If it's a simple house, it might be a good program for you to pull up and use, but I wouldn't rely on it heavily.
Yeah, I ran across one like that with an agent, about 6 months ago. I was about 500 feet less than what the MLS showed, so I called the agent up, who I knew, and I was like, where'd you get this number from? It's from the photographer with an app. I was like, oh.
Wow.
Yeah,
I don't think that's one of the drop downs.
Estimated drop down, that'll work.
I guess you could put estimated, yeah.
So-
No protection, but it'll work.
I went back out and remeasured the house again just to make sure I was right, and sure enough, I was right. And I was like, well, that's, we had a problem then, you know, it was, the seller was a little upset because they were, you know, obviously the contract was cut, and then, you know, here you go, so.
Well, Fannie Mae and these AMCs will tell you this app will measure the house to ANSI standards. Y'all will know that in Mississippi, appraisals are held to measuring to one of the 2 national standards, the state law. And Fannie Mae also requires, no matter which state you're in, that houses be measured using ANSI standards. That's the one just about every appraiser I know uses. And we have ANSI classes occasionally here. I know some of y'all have seen faces in some of those classes. But the AMCs in Fannie will tell you that this device will measure the ANSI standards, and that is 100% not correct.
I have one more question. I've been doing this for a long time, and I learned the other day, so on a house I sold, had a buyer, that Fannie Mae will not allow a waiver on a new construction house.
Well, that's good. They don't have data. Yeah, there's no data in the system on it.
But would they do a hybrid one? Or would
Yes,
It
yes.
still would do a hybrid?
Very possible that AMC chooses to order one, yes. And to Fannie Mae, that is an appraisal. Y'all understand? Hybrid product to Fannie Mae and to that lender, when that lender gets it, that lender's gonna say, yeah, McKeever did an appraisal on it. They're not gonna see all the, like I said, we can't make extraordinary assumptions that the data collector's information was correct. We're just taking that data and assuming. Personally, we're assuming it, but we can't make that legal assumption that information is correct. The appraiser is 100% liable for that final report that they put their signature on.
We're the ones with the E&O, we're the ones with the license.
So does
Data
your
collector doesn't
E&O
matter.
cover it?
Ma'am?
Would your E&O cover?
My E&O would likely
Because
cover,
someone else-
but I also may have some very uncomfortable conversations with
No.
my E&O insurance carrier.
No, I don't, our E&O, not all E&O is gonna cover a hybrid appraisal. The appraisers are gonna have to check in that.
Yeah, I think that'd be an individual thing to check on.
I checked on that this past week.
I'm not
just
gonna have that
because
problem.
this past it does. Not everybody's is the same.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Does Fannie Mae accept an AVM instead of an appraisal? ever?
AVM,
Uh-huh.
they have, yeah, Fannie Mae will allow AVMs. They're the ones that come actually from the Fannie Mae desktop underwriter. One of my lenders jump in and tell me how that works.
So if it qualifies for an appraisal waiver, then when we run it through
Not a
the.
waiver.
Oh, sorry.
Well, AVM
So the
is
AVM
used.
allows the waiver to be
So
enacted.
the
Right.
AVM drives whether a waiver is allowed.
And it just comes through the desktop underwriter whenever we underwrite the
Gotcha.
loan. It'll just pop up and say, hey, you can waive this appraisal.
And that's like what Amy was saying earlier, we're not here to fight the AVMs. Those are gonna happen, they've been around for, a long time, longer than I've probably been in it. So we can't stop that. But
But you
that's also
should.
the buyer taking on the responsibility of knowing who appraisal's done. This is causing confusion of the buyer thinks an appraisal, a legitimate appraisal is being done, and it's.
They're paying for
So
it.
Fannie Mae, let me just say this for y'all that don't know this is coming down, appraisal forms are about to change again. I know.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah.
The reason they talked about the Q3, Q1, C3, the reason they did that in the first place was because they wanted to be data-driven so that they could data mine our appraisals and put it in their algorithm so that they could, use these AVMs. I think, and according to Susie Pantsuit, trying to get rid of appraisers as much as they can, because they don't like us. They say we mess up their whole life. That's just what she said. She's probably true. But, so what's happening is now they drilled down and they realized, oh my gosh, we could data mine more. So they're going to start doing drop-down menus in the new appraisal forms, and it will expand. So if I say there's this feature, then it's going to ask me more questions about this particular feature, because they're just trying to keep drilling down and down and down and down so that they can use these algorithms more.
Right. And this, yeah, Joe.
I would just say, I've owned a bunch of homes as a homeowner, I've been a realtor and I've been a lender, and I'm firmly against appraisal waivers as a whole, because I've seen them from all three portions of the process. The appraisal waivers to me benefit sellers more than anybody else. Because,
Absolutely, 100%.
They're just getting the price for their house, no repairs called, they're getting what they want.
Right.
So the seller always wins with an appraisal waiver.
Absolutely.
The buyer always loses with an appraisal waiver because they don't have the data that they need.
Right.
I had somebody that got an appraisal waiver the other day, first thing I did, picked up, called the realtor, hey, they got an appraisal waiver, do you know what that means? And of course, the agent was like, no, talk to me about it. So I said, this is what it means. Now I'm gonna call your buyer and I'm gonna tell them what do they wanna do, okay? Pick up the phone, call the husband. Yeah, I'm saving $500. I'm not paying for that. I said, have you talked to your realtor about this? Not yet. I said, okay, call and talk to your realtor about it. Ended up talking to the wife. The wife's like, no, I think we should pay $500. Ended up having an appraisal on the appraisal waiver property. House appraised for $30,000 less than the contract price.
Sellers
$500 saved them
Yes,
$30,000.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a big deal.
As a
Okay.
listing agent, I am tickled
Right.
when the buyer has a waiver. That's like,
Yay.
no big deal. But now the agent representing that buyer, their hair should be standing up on the back of their head.
Like a refinance or.
So, I only get them when they're putting 20% down or more on a conventional loan. That's the only time you're really gonna see them, or a refi. But even on a refi, I would caution that because I've had refis where I've had appraisers in this room go out to the property and then we couldn't even get a valid appraisal because there was not sufficient collateral for that property.
Right.
So, if you get an appraisal waiver, the buyer can lose, the bank can definitely lose, because you can walk into a house that has no walls inside of it, but you got an AVM on it that says this house is good, but you walk in, there's nothing but studs. because nobody ever went to visit the
Right.
property. So then the bank's stuck with this piece of property they can't get rid of because the computer says it's worth $100,000, it's only worth 30 because it's been stripped of all the copper and everything in it. What are you gonna do there? So really, the only people that win are the sellers, you know, and so I just think that y'all really should protect your buyers. If they do say an ADM, hey, let's talk about this, let's talk about what it means. You know, you're not gonna be able to get any appraisal required repairs out of this. You don't know what the value's gonna be. You don't know what the size is gonna be. You know, because I took that appraisal waiver on a house I bought one day, had Neil come and measured after the fact, and it was like 200 square foot off.
Right.
But that's also.
As a realtor, I thought, this house is worth this because I ran my comps.
To piggyback that, that's a big potential fallout for these hybrid appraisals, is if they're not done correctly and they're overvalued, your buyer buys the house in 5 years, they call you because they're ready to sell it, they didn't get a right appraisal, you've got this great relationship with one of us, we go out there and do a pre-listing appraisal or measure it, and you're not selling the house because they're upside down.
That
All
sunroom
because
wasn't
you
supposed
didn't
to be
get
counted
the
as square footage, oops.
Can I ask a question as a broker? So would it be, just brainstorming here, but could we, as brokers and lenders, if they're going to take the appraisal waiver, maybe we should have them sign something
They do.
releasing us from
They do.
harm?
We make them sign something,
The
saying, we
lenders
told
are
you
having
not to
those.
do this, but you can do it if you want.
Yeah. The lenders are having those signed, and that's where I think our communication as realtors need to improve with our lenders and make sure that we're discussing these issues with that lender. You need to call Joey or any of our lenders out here we need to be discussing that with them and saying, what, if there's anything other than a full appraisal order, I need to be notified prior to that buyer signing that with the lender. If you don't, and they've already signed it, well, then it's too late. You can tell them the what ifs after the fact, but if they've already signed it, it may be too late. Yes, Kelly?
I don't know, we've got several lenders here, and I don't know what everybody's practice is, but I know that normally when I'm dealing with a deal, and they kind of smirk at me, but I try to speak with my listing agent as well as my buyer's agent. Although I'm representing my buyer, but like on this appraisal issue, you know, I want the listing agent to understand that, hey, we put this request in and this is, you know, I want them to be I want everybody on the same page. I don't want to get to the end of the deal and then have something blow up, the square footage isn't right, it wasn't a true appraisal, you know, whatever. But to be open with everybody that's involved in the deal, I think is very important. I really do, for the buyer and the seller.
Are you having that conversation with the agents
I do.
before that buyer signs that waiver?
Yes.
Okay, good
Yeah,
for you.
Yes, from the very start, because I don't want to be, well, you know, in the contract, it says that, look, I'm telling you, this is what can happen, and if it can, it normally does.
That's what we do need. We do need lenders calling and advising us of the option now that this buyer has to.
Not giving out buyers' personal information, but, you know, hey, this is what underwriting, I made underwriting says that we have the option to do. A lot of times,
And we
that's
get
contracts
that
are
way
written.
before documents come out,
Yeah.
so we can have time to communicate that to everyone.
Right. I think it's crucial. I think that's the only way this works for your buyer, is making sure we are communicating with them the pros and cons of any potential waiver. You need to have it on the front end with them. But when it does come up, when that lender plugs this into the DU system and it pops up, appraisal waiver approved, you hope that lender will reach out to the buyer's agent and discuss this. We absolutely need to have time to go over that with those buyers.
We have a information thing now that we hand out that says the difference between a home inspection and appraisal. Is there something that we can come up with that says the difference between an appraisal, a true appraisal, an ADM, and a hybrid?
You know, we probably could get with our MAR and come up with some document that would work statewide for, you know, our standard forms. In the meantime, y'all, this is all pretty new. I mean, waivers have been around a while. This hybrid product is something relatively new. I think in the meantime, while we're trying to have that. Now, you as a broker, you certainly have the ability to go in and create such a document to have for your clients. Not any different than what I'm going to do is in conversation with my client, is what we're gonna have, and explain these different options to them. But yeah, as a broker, you can certainly do it. If you're waiting on MAR to do it in our standard forms, that may take a little while.
I'm actually on the appraisal committee for that, and they're looking for things to do. I will bring that up to them.
Be good to do. Be a good form to have to explain in detail the differences, so you have your buyers look at that and sign it on the front end.
I mean, we love NAR to do it, but NAR's got a little on their plate right now.
We have our hands full, yes. So, anyway, these are a lot of issues out there regarding appraisals and NAR. And us as realtors certainly have our hands full with what we have to look forward to over the next year or two, waiting on this lawsuit to be finalized after appeals and see what the final outcome of that is. Matt, you have anything, Neil, y'all?
All
jump
two
in?
things I probably say every time I'm in front of agents, and if you're an agent that calls me, you know what I'm gonna say, build a relationship with an appraiser. If you don't have one, we're not mean, and we don't try to be mean. But the second thing is, the adjusted square footage on that tax card is never intended to be the heated square footage. If you use it, you are, if you use that adjusted square footage, we probably cuss you a little bit when we're going to the house. It's probably gonna be a problem. The base square footage rarely can be used.
Isn't
So-
the assessed value the same as the appraised value?
We can make it that way if you like. We can use that assessed value all the time if you want us to. So, yeah, don't have to get us to measure them, but get the houses measured if you don't have a good square footage. And just because the prior square footage in MLS was quoted, that doesn't mean it's correct either. I know this, we say this all the time, but I will see it next week. I will do an appraisal next week, and the adjusted square footage will be the square footage on the listing. And they'll get mad at us because we didn't get the value. And they'll act like they've never heard of it.
Every now and then it works, Makita. I had somebody measure their house, it was 1 foot off. It was a townhouse with no garage.
It happens, but it's an accident. It's an
Broken
accident.
clock is right twice a day.
But you know what? If they charge $50 a measurement, it's 1 foot off, that's $175 a foot. They still want it.
Exactly, they still want
It
it.
didn't really make it.
That's what I
If, you know, and not all agents are unfortunately doing, you know, like getting the appraisal square footage and inputting that as we should right now. But if they're at least putting who the appraiser is, and you're going back to now list a property that was appraised 3 years ago, and you can see who the appraiser is, guess what? Those appraisers, if you text them and say, hey, you measured this house 3 years ago, what was the appraised square footage? They'll give you that. I've done with all 3 of these, I know, and most all of them, and then now they may say, well, let me get back to my office later tonight, because they're out doing stuff, but they'll give you that, and guess what? That's an appraised square footage.
Square footage of an appraisal is not a confidential part of the appraisal. It is a material physical fact of what we come up with. Now, can appraisers go out saying, can all 3 of us go measure the same house and come up with different square footage? More than likely, we will, because you have rounding issues. You know, you may have some round to the nearest half foot, which is allowed. Some measure exact, which I do.
Just threw that in there.
Find that unusual. But, so, yeah, each appraiser can come up with different square footages, but it should all be relatively close. Now, you get some, I've been behind some appraisers that I think, oh my Lord, where did this guy get his training, you know, because.
You took it off the tax assessor.
Yeah, it's terrible. But the square footage, I don't mind sharing. We give it to the listing agent when you close that listing out. If you call and ask us for it, we'll certainly give it to you, so that when, y'all know when you close it out, it's asking the appraiser's name and the appraiser's appraised square footage. We don't mind giving that out to have on that listing.
I won't give it out, because I want the right data.
Yeah.
It makes a big
We
difference.
want it out there. I
Some of
mean,
you
that's.
guys put it on the MLS.
Yeah, we commend you, Neil.
Yeah.
We
And
always
don't
do.
just put our name in there, because we're the last appraiser you talk to. I talked to an agent a couple weeks ago, and he's like, oh yeah, if I don't know who the appraiser is, I just put your name in there. Don't do that. I'd look it up and tell them I didn't do the appraisal, and now there was no, who knows.
Yeah,
if
but
the appraiser
our
was.
office administrator's happy because we gave them a name,
Yeah.
so it's okay.
Just don't randomly choose somebody, because that causes a lot of conflict.
Oh, I had my phone ring for 2 weeks from other appraisers trying to get information. I finally emailed Tom and said, hey, you've got to take my,
Yeah, we
not
call
do
them
this.
over.
Yeah, y'all take my name off.
And then your name pops up as one of those agents that did that. So
Yeah.
just don't do it.
Way in the back.
Yeah, I have a question. For a pre-listing measurement only, can the appraisers that are in here today, thank you for coming, but can y'all tell us who you are so we can call you that you do that? No, not all appraisers do that.
Most appraisers will. I mean, all three of us certainly do it for, that's a part of our business. What we do is measure homes for agents pre-listing. Y'all, and if y'all don't know, it's McKeever Hoeing. He's got the funny name that sounds like coin, but it starts with an H. McKeever, Neil Copeland, and I'm Bill Anton. And just about any appraiser y'all reach out to, Amy Logan in the back, I think that's all our appraisers in here. Yep. And, but any appraiser just about will measure a home for a fee. Like you say, the fee is nominal compared to the price per foot right now. So if it's 100 square feet, that is more than feasible to have that house measured before you list it. And if you explain that to your sellers, most of them are definitely in agreement. If they don't have a copy of an old appraisal, and I'm sure y'all do this, if I go in to list a home, first thing I ask, do you have a copy of an old appraisal? And if so, I'm gonna look at the date on it, because when did the state pass that law in 14 on the ANSI measurements, or us required? Maybe before 2014, I think, that there were no standards in place to measure homes. So if you had 3-foot knee walls in a bonus room, we would measure typically to the wall, the floor area. Now ANSI requires that we stop at an imaginary 5-foot line, shoulder height basically for me, for Lisa, where's Lisa get?
And
She knows I pick on her all the time, so it's okay. So the width of that room gets measured at a 5-foot mark. And so you may have 2 more feet of floor space that's not included in that. And almost
So they may
all-
want me to be their appraiser.
You can start your property down.
Yeah.
So, but look at the date on that old appraisal first and make sure of the date of it, because if it was prior to 2014, and you've got knee walls, it may not be for that.
So 2014.
And also stairways, you know, on ANSI, when you measure, we're measuring the upstairs. The stairway is included on that second level as well, so it adds additional square footage in for that stairway.
Which I wasn't counting that prior to the ANSI.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I was taking the upstairs staircase out. I
And you
still
go to-
disagree with the rule, but we follow it.
Yeah. And you go to the back of the, like on an upstairs wall now, you go to the back of the stud in the attic. You start from there and go to the stud wall, the back of the stud on the opposite wall. So you're roughly getting 0.6 of a foot if you measure sheetrock to sheetrock in width. Now, obviously, you have to take it out if you're going somewhere, you know,
Right.
it gets confusing sometimes.
And that's why a lot of the builder houses are bigger than what the builder, so if you go by the builder stuff and you're going out to list the seller's house, this is bonus, you're going out to list the seller's house, and you have the measurement from the builder, you better have that house measured, because the builder may not have, some of them do have them measured by appraisers, but a lot of them don't. And guess what, that house is likely bigger, and you may be leaving money on the table for your seller if you don't have it
Builders are
measured.
crazy not to get their houses measured.
Yeah,
Absolutely insane.
I want to
You
do
know
one
what they
for.
told me years ago is they said the reason they did that is it's on the plans, it's frame to frame, because when they took it somewhere, they charged them by the foot. And if they added the brick, that added more money to what they had to pay out, so that's why they were. And that was probably 20 years ago, but it seems to work out, so
Yeah,
it makes sense.
I mean, it could be a 200 square foot difference on some new construction houses. You wouldn't believe the appraisals we do, we finish them and they're $8,000-$10,000. We're appraising them $8,000-$10,000 when they're selling.
I had one just under 400 feet larger in Olive Branch that I did, and the builder was there, and he said, I said, man, this house, I knew after measuring it was bigger than what they had shown on the listing. He said that we added area to it, and the framers did, added area to it, and it ended up getting finished upstairs. And that house was almost 400 feet larger. He said, please don't give anybody that square footage. Not my problem. But anyway, they're, you know, most any appraiser will do that though, will measure for a fee, and provide you a computer-generated sketch of the property, and certainly a lot more accurate than pulling that good old adjusted area from the tax assessor.
And try not to call us the day before you're gonna list it. We're not getting paid enough to stop everything and go do that day.
Call them the
Unless
day
you're
of
gonna
your
pay
listing.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those.
You gotta get those fresh measurements.
Yeah. So, y'all, we try to be partners. With me, I'm a partner with myself. I'm wearing both hats. But appraisers want to be your business partner. That we're all in this boat together, all working for clients out here and public trust, and we want to be good business partners with y'all, and it's one reason we tried to have continuing education classes here that are crossover, that provide education for appraisers and sales people and brokers. And we'll continue to do that. We're going to continue to try to have that type of education that works for both. The more you understand our business, the better agents you'll be. Deal. Any questions? Yes.
Do each of you all charge basically the same thing for the measurements?
We're not allowed to. But state law, we're not allowed to discuss that.
I can tell you on some properties, I'm gonna be $25 higher than these two.
You don't want to do it.
Just saying.
It is. So, I do that on appraisals sometimes. I've had a guy call me on an appraisal, and I look at it and I said, you know, I'm probably gonna send you to one of these guys. They're gonna be cheaper than I am. Depends on how much headache I
How
want.
much basement you got?
Yeah. So, but yes, no, the fees are going to be reasonable, I would say. You know, I will tell y'all, I had a big house guy, a builder, called me on the other day to measure. It was over 3,000 feet. I charged him $200 to go measure that house. So that was my personal decision, the business decision as to what to charge. If it had been a smaller house, obviously my business decision would have been less, a little bit less, not a whole lot, but a little bit.
If it's raining, if it's cold.
Look, if it's raining and cold and you got a dog that bites, it's going to be.
He's gonna ignore your phone call right now.
Yeah.
All of them have been really good. Everybody in this room has been really good about when you call and you have a question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That they will help you out.
And we get calls all the time. My wife told me if I could get paid for all the calls I take, I could have retired years ago. So, but we don't mind. We most of us don't mind. If we have time, we're going to stop for it and answer your questions. Take time to talk to you. Try to help you through the situation you're working with, because I do it with other brokers. I do it with these guys. I call them with unique situations. We call and discuss issues. I had a broker call me the other night. We stayed on the phone over an hour talking about this NAR lawsuit issue. Corey and I talk a lot. I mean, it's Clint. I see people in here that we talk back and forth a lot. Maybe not every week, but sometime during the month, we're probably going to have a discussion on something somewhere along the way. And we're all glad to do that. We want to try to help y'all make your job easier, and we need y'all to help us sometimes make our job easier. Any more questions?
Question, but you reminded me of a topic that may be good for just a 10 or 15-minute Q&A or a appraisal blast at some kind of new agent training or any agent training. And that is a reminder of things that a seller can do to be ready for the day of appraisal. I've gotten caught a couple of times by not reminding an appraiser to make sure you move your furniture and stuff and boxes away from the electric panel and allow the appraiser to actually, or in that case it's home inspector, but make sure that the appraiser can get into an attic and stuff like that.
Right.
Just to make it so that you can actually do your job when you go out there.
Well, attic access, crawl space access, you know, I mean, how many times do we go out and a crawl space got screws through the crawl space entry door? We cannot open it. I'm not going to my truck. I've got tools. I'm old country boy. I've got tools in my truck, but I'm not going and unscrewing that door. That's beyond what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So yes, make sure those things, because if that crawl space is screwed shut, somebody's paying a fee for me to go back out again. and
Maybe
look
a
under it.
deranged president.
Attic too.
Who knows?
And so typically, the lender is gonna be ordering that follow-up inspection a few days prior to closing, and I go out and now open that crawl space door, and it's stacked with debris under there. You know what's fixing to happen? There's gonna be an additional requirement, and your closing's fixing to get delayed. So, yeah, anything like that is good, Stephanie, and that's probably good for a new member orientation.
Yeah.
If they can absorb that much. There's a lot of information to absorb on these orientations. I know Amy and Michelle have been doing those, and y'all give them a lot to try to take in.
I don't know about new member orientation. That's they probably don't even know what an appraisal is at that point. But anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah. In the back?
Yeah, I have another question. This is not hybrid or anything, it's just appraisal. But why is it that, tell us as agents, why do lenders always, and lenders might come to us, say, why do you always ask for an appraisal, like, when the house is toothpicks? You know, like, that's what I call it, when it's framed, not even barely framed, if there's an appraisal done, then you have to go back when it's done and actually, you know, redo all that. Why do we do two appraisals in construction? Why don't we hold out and wait until you can see what the house looks like?
I think it's lack, I'll tell you my opinion, I think it's lack of.
There's a reason, I'm sure, but what is it?
So, one reason, there's multiple reasons for that. Number one is like for us, I cannot submit anybody to the closing department that doesn't have an appraisal already done. So I have somebody that's supposed to close next Friday, I have them clear to close because we underwrote everything on the file, but the closers have to actually review that appraisal, you know, it's part of the process. So I can't send it to my closing department until I have an appraisal. Well, the house isn't ready yet. So we can either delay closing until the house is 100% complete, and then the appraiser goes out there and looks at it, and then sends us the report, and then we get to the closing, and then they wait 3 days. Or we can send them out there, the house isn't ready yet, we get everything in closing, the day before closing, they go out there, take a picture, say it's done, boom, we're done, we're ready to close. That's why we have to send them out there, because it's just a logistic thing in order to get them closed on time.
Is there a certain point though where it makes sense to go the first time? 'Cause like
I hold mine out to 90%. I want my house 90% complete before I send my appraiser out.
I agree with that.
I've got one right now.
That's FHA.
FHA having full-blown specs, plans, all the documentation for FHA, it has to be 90% when we go out. If it's between 90% and 100, then we can go out and do it subject to completion, and we'll, and for FHA, they do have to use a CO. The appraiser cannot go back on behalf of HUD and do a final inspection on new construction. It has to be done by, you have to use the permits and COs. Now, if the lender themselves insist on a appraiser going back and checking, which I don't disagree with that, then the final inspection is done for that lender only. There's no references to the HUD or to the case number on it. And not my rules, but Neil certainly has been in communication with HUD in Atlanta and has documentation to show that that is the case. So we get lenders very frustrated with us because, well, we got other appraisers that will go do a final inspection on new construction. Well, because they're gonna wear horizontal stripes one day is not a reason for me to do that.
It's actually in the Code of Federal Regulations that we can't, that appraisers are not allowed to do the final inspection on new construction. We're subject to indemnification, which means that, if something's wrong with it, we're financially liable for the house if it's not built to code or anything like that, if we sign off on it and say it's complete.
But we need to see that legal, we need to see the legal matches, the title work, and that's what they're looking to match everything up. So that's why they have to just get something out there in writing, and then you just go out there and do a final on it.
VA allows homes to be appraised prior to completion, and they call it customer preference items that can be remaining. Okay, so customer preference items can be landscaping, it can be the flooring, it can be, what's some of the other things, painting. They do want all the plumbing and electrical fixtures topped off and finished when we go out. Those are not customer preference items. Those are construction items that need to be there. So with VA, I can go out and do a VA appraisal, and if I call a listing agent, I'm going to ask, are the electrical and plumbing items topped off and finished? And I get told, oh yes, go ahead, and I get out there and there's not a light fixture hanging in the house.
Yeah.
And so then I'm saying, okay, call me when it's ready, and I'll come back and do it again, and I go to the VA system and state that it's not ready. With VA, you can also get all the documentation, the plan specs, all that. If you want to insist on it being done prior to only having customer preference items remaining, we can certainly do that, but the lender's got to provide all that information to us. Conventional loans, there's really no guidance. If the house is far enough along that we feel comfortable completing the appraisal, based on conversations with the builder or the listing agent on the finished materials that are left to go in it, we can certainly move forward with that appraisal. If it's there's really no guidance in there as to what percentage or anything it has to be.
But for us to measure it, the outside walls need to be finished. Brick and siding and all that, at least for me.
Yeah, I want it sheetrocked, I want all that in, I still don't want to go out with studs in the house.
I've has to do it when it's framed, and can be done, but it's not great.
Great question.
Yeah, thank you. I have an actual lender not chosen by myself, just for a client that's been chasing. It's been chasing hard. Sending a appraiser out, sending an appraiser out. I'm like, this house hasn't moved. The builder has a situation in Memphis with a bunch of homes. And so our piece of property has not moved in 2 months, hasn't been done, along with the others that he has. It's some water issues and different like that. But I keep telling them, I know you're not ordering the appraisal yet. What if we cancel this contract because it's just gone on so long and the house isn't even finished? That's
right.
Money, And so I was just wondering, why there was, this person's chasing the house in a very early stage, and so for the appraisal. So I was just wondering if there was the logic behind it.
In that case, I don't see the logic behind it unless do you, Joey?
Maybe the borrower has communicated well with the lender that they're in the very early stages and they're not in a big rush, so the lender's probably trying to rush and go ahead and get an underwriting decision on it.
Yeah, she's been told
when
that
they don't
7 or 8
have to.
times. Yeah, she's been told 7 or 8 times. It's not even supposed to close in January, but now it's still sitting still. So, it doesn't make sense to me. I just want to make sure that it was.
She might just try to make sure it don't go anywhere.
Yeah. That's right, yeah, too. Some lenders won't go to underwriting without an appraisal, so they want to go ahead and get the borrower qualified now, and if they qualify them now and just do a final inspection at the end, great, because then they're approved, and the builder's approved for 3 or 4 months. But yeah, they get the appraisal, and hey, they're locked in with me now, since, they're not going to leave me when rates are better, or when whatever, and so the lender could be trying to do that too, hey, let me get this appraisal done and try to lock this borrower into me. That's what that sounds like.
Push. That's why I brought it up. So I just wanted to thank you, though. That's a great answer.
Well, if I had to finish on anything today, communicate with your buyers, your sellers, and your lenders on this hybrid appraisal issues, appraisal waivers. We all need to be informed and make sure we're giving proper guidance and advice to our clients, buyers and sellers. And it requires communication, though. It certainly requires communication with the lenders. And even then, if the lenders are using these AMCs, they may not be aware. It may take phone calls when that initial contact's made by a data collector or site inspector to say, whoa, that's a red flag. We need to put the brakes on here until we can get this squared away. And
I want to say that I ask often when I'm calling agents about, the appraisal. And they'll say, well, the appraisal's going to be done tomorrow, And I'll say, who called you? And they'll say, well, I don't know. I mean, their phone number's in my, and I'm thinking, you don't know their name because, I know most all the appraisers down here and probably the ones in all the outlying counties. But if they don't get the appraiser's name, then I'm like way in the dark.
I don't get it. I don't know why you would allow someone to access your listing without knowing exactly who's going into your listing. You're taking responsibility for letting them in. I mean, common sense tells me when that appraiser calls, or the secretary. Now, y'all, they're appraisers that have a secretary or assistant that sets up. I have Eric in my office that schedules appraisals for me, but he always said, Bill Anton is the appraiser. And so you know who the appraiser is. If you're not getting that information on that initial phone call, ask those questions. You need to know who's going into your listing.
I'm usually going to text him. That way I've got, documentation. Because I've had some instances where, well, I didn't tell you to go in the house. Well, yeah, you did. Here it is, on text message. So and I always start with who I am and what, and what property I want to get in and all that. That we've always got some type of documentation on there.
And even new construction, I will text the agent and say, hey, I've got the appraisal. I know it's not complete yet. I look at the listing photos that just listed last week and it's still under construction. But they've ordered the appraisal, and is it okay if I go in? And they know who I am. Should know who I am.
Well, and things do happen. I've got one that it's probably been 20 years ago. And an appraisal, there were two houses side by side on the same street. And when our pictures came in, the appraisal came in, and we looked at our pictures and we sent it to the borrower, and the borrower says, that's not the house I'm buying. So I think, it wasn't any of you guys. I'm
Thank goodness.
Okay, well, somebody, didn't change out the photographs and so we reached out to the appraiser and he said, that's the house I appraised. I said, it's the wrong one. Who let you in? And maybe the other house had a contract working on it as well, but he appraised someone else's.
The wrong one?
Yeah.
Wow.
So things can happen.
But y'all keep those records. I mean, I do. So an appraiser calls me to get into one of my listings. I've got it written in my file. I'm still the old kill a tree guy. I've got paperwork. I've got a file on everything. I've got it written in, who the appraiser is, who the home inspector is. I know I can go back a month from now and any issue comes up, look back. I know who's been into my listing. I want to make sure that I've got records of who went in. You're letting people in to your client's home, and you're charged with protecting that home. We have to know who we're letting go into those houses. So that initial contact by a data collector or site inspector, that's the red flag. And if you don't recognize that name when they call, Michelle, a month ago, had no idea who this, knew the name, had a name of who was going or was trying to go. And I told her, I said, just get on the Mississippi Appraisal Board and look. And sure enough, there was no appraiser in there by that name. And so, red flag, that is an unlicensed individual trying to gain access to your home. The other flag was they didn't have access to the home. They didn't have a super. They had no way to get in. Now, there are appraisers. I've had an appraiser come up from Tupelo. I've had one come from Oxford. Neither had access, super access. I don't know what I do. I print them off the 3 highest sales as a listing broker. I print them the 3 highest sales that I know will cover that contract, and I actually take it over there and hand it to them when I unlock the house. Say, hey, here's some great sales for this house. They don't have to use it. And by the way, agents, prior to the appraisal, that is your opportunity to provide that appraiser any information you want them to have. There's nothing wrong with what I do. If that appraiser's coming from Oxford or somewhere, by all means, I'm advocating for my seller. And I'm gonna hand them those 3 high sales and say, hey, here's 3 great sales. You pull what you want, obviously, but here's sales that you could consider. And after I sit there and wait on them an hour to get through at the house and lock it back up, I grin all the way back to the office. So I know that appraisal, there's not gonna be any problems on that appraisal. All right, guys, any other information, any other questions?
Hey, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I just want to say, because you were just saying about sales, if you have sales, give them to us. And more importantly, if you have a sale that looks like it would be a good comp, but you know the inside of it, they had 75 dogs and it stunk and all of this stuff, something that we would not necessarily know when we're looking at it, tell us, that house is not a good sale because for whatever reason, just FYI, so that we can look at that with suspect eyes, right? So.
Buyer's agent or listing agent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Either side.
I'd love to get that information.
And we've talked about that in prior panel discussions we've done, that when you close that listing out, you're through marketing that property. You're through trying to show it to be the castle that you want it to be. You're through with it then. Go in the notes when you close it out and say, I'll say pet odor, it's cigarette smoke, things like that.
All the carpet and kills every surface.
Right, and then when we're looking at that sale and it's $30,000 below the other homes that are somewhat similar to it, we have a good understanding now of why, if you put that note in there, that, oh, it was really a doghouse, but we blew it up and made it be a castle.
I
Which
tell
is our
my
job.
agents to just drop off some comps and leave them on the countertop for the appraisal. For the appraiser to come in, just leave them laying out there.
I've had sellers or agents that have had the house measured, leave the sketch there, leave sales there, leave tax records there, copy the deed there. I'll take anything you want to hand me. I've had an envelope, a listing agent bring me an envelope this thick of information on the property, and I appreciate it. I'm gonna weed through it and see what's in there, and some of it's gonna be useful to me. So,
Follow that up. If an appraiser goes to the house and then calls you before they complete the report after the inspection, talk with them and let them lead the conversation. Don't be panicked that you can't talk to the appraiser, because if they're leading the conversation, asking for help or asking for assistance, they're trying to give you one last ditch effort to help the situation out. So don't threaten them, don't tell them they have to get a certain value. But I have been told this, and it was a Memphis agent, so I doubt they're in here, but they told me that was my job and they weren't gonna help me.
Oh.
I said, okay,
Oh.
I have completed my job, and I'll go ahead and send a report in. So don't say that, because that's been
Is it
said before.
appropriate to
That's
call
our
the listing
software
agent
saying
and
we have a
say
problem.
that it's
Right.
not gonna appraise before ever going to the property?
No,
no.
we can have that inclination, but we can't say that.
I may know
And
that.
then I sent the lady, the comps, that I found, and I said, and it also has a full separate lot that comes with it. And she's like, I don't see that on the.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, what you're saying is a predetermined value. We cannot have a predetermined value because we
She's
have to
very
remain
biased
biased.
on everything.
Yeah.
Not just mine, like, if you say her name, she's killing the deal. That, she thinks that is her
That's
job.
not any of us.
And she will make,
Y'all
she has no.
When the ACC came out,
I'm
it
just glad-
left the impression that lenders, or that agents could not communicate with appraisers, lenders couldn't communicate with appraisers, but that's not the case. We cannot discuss value with you. We can discuss the property all day long. We can ask y'all to provide us with any sales you want considered. You're welcome to call us and say, hey, here are some sales that I have. If you didn't have the opportunity to leave them at the house or anything prior, you're welcome to send those to us. But we cannot discuss value. That's where the line is drawn. So we can talk about that property to any extent other than discussing value.
So that you can't call me and say, hey, what do you need this to be?
Again, I made a reference to horizontal stripes a little while ago.
That's a hard no. Well,
Yeah.
obviously it's on the contract, what we needed to be.
Yeah, well, there's that. We are reviewing that contract.
I'm just glad we were able to talk about a non-controversial topic that was pretty boring and that nobody had any questions about. That's what we needed on this Friday.
Yeah. Y'all, again, you're welcome to call any of us or just about any other appraiser. I'm probably not, shouldn't be speaking for them, but for us, certainly, us three, you're welcome to call us to discuss anything at any time other than Friday night at 5 o'clock. I promise you, I'm not talking to you on, promise it makes the restaurant Friday night at 5 o'clock. Thank y'all for coming.